I'm back. Same hospital, same waiting room, same chipped floor tile near the coffee machine. But I'm not the same person who sat here a year ago. Back then, I was a wreck. My hands trembled, my thoughts raced, and my body felt like a borrowed suit, unfamiliar and fragile. When the doctor said the word cancer, something inside me cracked so loudly I barely heard anything after. That was the beginning, the end of before, the start of everything after. Now, a year later, I sit here with that strange kind of awareness that only comes from surviving something that tried to undo you. I don't flinch when the nurse calls out names. I don't panic when I hear beeping from the hallway. I've heard it all. I've felt it all. This place, once a trigger, now feels like neutral ground. Not safe, but known. I look around and recognize the nurse behind the counter. She smiles at me, not the way people smile when they feel sorry for you, but the way you smile at someone you've seen a dozen times and still want to see again. That counts for something. There's a kid sitting across from me, hoodie pulled low, hands tucked deep in his sleeves. He's trying to disappear. His mother's holding a folder that looks just like the one I clutched last year, bent, creased, stuffed with questions and test results. I want to say something. Instead, I just meet his eyes for a second and nod. Silent solidarity. You don't forget the first time you walk into this place not knowing what's wrong, just that something is. You don't forget the way the walls seem to lean in, the way your name on a clipboard suddenly feels like a sentence. But that's not me anymore. Now I know how this place smells like alcohol wipes paper forms in fear. Now I know that the second IV is worse than the first, but better than the fifth. Now I know that a good nurse is gold and that bad news delivered gently still shatters you just the same. The difference is now I know how to survive it. The clock on the wall is still ticking like it's mocking everyone. Time stretches differently in hospitals. It slows and thickens. It taunts you. I stare at it because these days I notice time in ways I never used to. I count sunrises. I memorize the space between heartbeats. I pay attention to how long it takes for tea to steep. Albert Einstein once said, "Time is an illusion," and historians still argue whether he was referring to physics or philosophy. But honestly, I think about it every time I sit here and feel like 5 minutes has lasted a lifetime. I glance at the notepad in my lap. There's a doodle of a bird I tried to draw. Not very good. But it's flying, and that's what matters. My appointment is soon. Just a checkup. I say that casually now, just. But last year, the word checkup meant panic. It meant, will they say the thing I'm afraid of again? Today, it's a marker, a checkpoint. Another square filled in on this unexpected calendar of survival. I pull out my pen, the one with purple ink I stole from radiology because it writes smoother than my emotions. I scribble down, day 365, still here, still breathing, still scared sometimes, still choosing to live anyway. The nurse calls my name. I don't flinch. I stand up. I adjust my hoodie. I smile not because I'm okay, but because I'm here. And maybe, just maybe, being here really here is enough. The hallway smells like lemon-scented disinfectant and something else, that faint metallic edge that always seems to linger in medical buildings. I walk past it like I've done this 100 times because, well, I have. My sneakers squeak a little on the linoleum floor. I don't apologize for the noise. I used to. I used to apologize for everything. I step onto the scale. The nurse doesn't comment, and I'm grateful. I don't need the reminder that my weight has been playing hopscotch for months. Some days my appetite disappears. Other days I inhale a whole plate of fries like it's the last meal on earth. My body has been through enough. It doesn't owe anyone anything. Blood pressure cuff, thermometer, pulse oximeter, routine. I smile at the nurse and she smiles back, already writing down my numbers. We don't have to talk much. We've learned each other's rhythms. Eventually, I'm alone in the room, gown on, feet dangling off the exam table. The paper beneath me crinkles every time I shift. It's always freezing in here and the air conditioning hums like it's trying to lull me into forgetting where I am. I pull out my phone and open the notes app. There's a list titled Routines That Keep Me Human. It's silly, or maybe not. Drink water before coffee. Brush hair, even if it's barely there. Stretch shoulders, not goals. Write one sentence that doesn't mention cancer. Say thank you at least once a day. These aren't world-changing rules, but they anchor me. Because when everything else fell apart, routines stayed. And routines, I've learned, are a form of survival. Take the morning playlist, for example. Every day I play the same 3 songs when I wake up. Not because they're inspirational, but because they're familiar. Familiar feels safe. The opening beat of the first track is like a heartbeat that isn't mine, but I borrow it until my own steadies. Even my meds have rhythm now. White pill, blue pill. Wait 2 hours. Green pill. Maybe eat. Maybe don't. It's a choreography I've memorized better than any TikTok dance. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks invented medicine or just rituals that looked like it, and honestly, it doesn't matter. A ritual that keeps you alive, that's medicine enough. Sometimes people ask me how I keep going. They expect some grand cinematic answer, a quote about resilience, or a story involving a child I promised to live for. But most days it's not that deep. I keep going because the kettle whistles at 8 a.m., because my socks have foxes on them, because I want to know what happens in the next episode, because today's cereal didn't taste like cardboard. And because there's a sticker on my fridge that says, survival is a victory. Breakfast is a win. I wrote it myself one foggy Tuesday. My doctor walks in. He's wearing the same dark blue scrubs he always does. Clipboard in hand, but now it's a tablet. Progress. He smiles the soft professional kind. 1 year in, he says, that's something. I nod. It's something I echo. He starts asking questions. How's the fatigue, the appetite? Any changes in mood? I answer like I'm taking a quiz I already know the answers to. But then he pauses, looks me in the eye. And how's your mind, he asks. That one catches me off guard. My mind. I consider lying, saying something cheerful, but instead I breathe in slow and honest. It's tired, I say, but it's not giving up. He doesn't write that down, he just nods. Later on my way out, the receptionist hands me a new appointment card. It's pink, brighter than usual. For a second, I just stare at it. Another date, another checkpoint, another step. Outside, the sun is too bright. I squint and pull my hoodie tighter. But I smile, not because I'm cured, not because I'm happy, because I have a routine, and routines are keeping me alive. I didn't expect to miss my hair. Not in the obvious tragic way people imagine, no dramatic clumps in the shower drain, no sobbing in front of the mirror. Mine started going slowly, like autumn leaves falling out of season. A strand here, a strand there. I find them on my pillow, caught in the zipper of my jacket, or stuck to the edge of my coffee mug, like a quiet reminder that everything was changing. Eventually, I stopped brushing it. What was the point? Each stroke felt like a goodbye. When I finally stood in front of the bathroom mirror with clippers in hand, I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just trying to take control of something, anything. So I buzzed it all off. Alone. No music playing, no tears. It wasn't a moment of empowerment, it was survival. Afterward, I ran my fingers over my scalp. It was soft, weirdly soft, like velvet that hadn't made up its mind about whether it liked being touched. I looked into the mirror and didn't recognize myself. But I didn't hate the reflection either. Just didn't know her yet. For weeks, I wore hats, scarves, hoodies. Once I even wrapped an old t-shirt around my head, like some kind of suburban ninja. I wasn't hiding. I was protecting something fragile, the in-between version of me, not sick, not healed, just becoming. People around me tried to be kind. Too kind sometimes. You still look beautiful, they'd say. I barely noticed, or the classic, it's just hair. Just hair. That phrase made me want to scream into a pillow, which for the record I did. Twice. Because it's never just hair. It's the way the wind moves through it. It's how it catches light when you laugh. It's the memory of your mom braiding it before school, or the way your partner tucked it behind your ear when you were too tired to do it yourself. It's identity, it's gender, it's normalcy. And now it was gone. I started noticing how many women's products, commercials, magazines, influencers all wrap themselves around long, thick, shiny hair like it was a personality trait. Without it, I felt erased. One afternoon at the grocery store, I caught a little kid staring at me. Big, round eyes. Cheeks sticky with something red and fruit-flavored. I expected his mom to hush him to pull him away, but instead he just said, "You look like a superhero." I blinked. What? Like the ball when he said, grinning. "She can fly." And then he ran off toward the cereal aisle. I stood there frozen, holding a basket with nothing but almond milk and canned peaches, and realized something strange. I wasn't offended. I wasn't embarrassed. I was flattered. Because maybe in some weird way I did look like someone who had powers. I had faced down infusions, and insomnia swallowed a pharmacy's worth of pills and still showed up to buy peaches on a Tuesday afternoon. A few weeks later, I went outside without a hat. It wasn't some declaration, I just forgot to grab one. Halfway down the street, I noticed the breeze on my scalp was cool, almost refreshing, and no one stared. Or if they did, I didn't care. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians shaved their heads for hygiene or for fashion, but part of me likes to think it was both survival and style, all rolled into one. I started experimenting. Big earrings, bright lipstick. I wasn't trying to make up for my missing hair. I just wanted to feel playful again. And oddly, without the curtain of hair hiding my face, I saw myself more clearly. There was strength in this new silhouette. I won't lie, some days I still miss the feeling of running my hands through something soft and familiar. Some mornings, I'd reach for a hair tie out of habit and laugh bitterly when I remembered. But I didn't hate the mirror anymore. I even took a few selfies. Sent one to my friend with the caption, "Me, but extra aerodynamic." She replied with flame emojis and a gif of a rocket launching. That night, I sat in bed and wrote in my journal. Maybe losing my hair wasn't the end of anything. Maybe it was the start of seeing myself without the distractions. Because sometimes what falls away makes space for what needs to grow. There's a strange pressure that comes with being the strong one. It starts innocently. Someone sends a message, "You're so inspiring." A family member whispers, "I don't know how you do it." Even a nurse, kind-eyed, gentle, calls you so brave. At first it feels nice, like applause after a painful solo. But then it becomes heavy, a kind of performance you didn't audition for. Every time I smiled through nausea, people clapped. Every time I made a joke about my IV stand being my dance partner, people laughed. And every time I admitted that I was scared or tired or angry, the silence was louder than the chemo machine. Don't get me wrong, I get it. People need to believe in the myth of the cheerful cancer patient. The one who rises above, who wears pink and runs marathons and never once screams into a pillow until their throat gives out. But here's the truth, I wasn't always brave. I wasn't always grateful. And I sure as hell wasn't always smiling. There were days I resented the sunrise because it meant I had to fight again. There were nights I lay awake wondering if the real me had quietly died when the diagnosis came and this version hairless hollowed, pretending to be inspirational was just a placeholder. I once overheard a friend say she's handling this so well. I wanted to turn around and yell, "Handling it!" I cried over an oatmeal commercial this morning, but I didn't because the cult of positivity is polite and relentless. I started noticing it in the books people gave me. Titles like Choose Joy and Every Day is a Gift. One had a watercolor flower on the cover and a chapter called Gratitude Cures Fear. I almost threw it across the room. Historians still argue whether Stoic philosophers like Epictetus genuinely suppressed emotion or simply learned how to talk themselves through pain, but I can promise you, even Epictetus never dealt with IV bruises and mouth sores and people who told him to just stay hopeful. Eventually, I stopped pretending to be the brave one. I started saying things like, today sucks, and no, I don't want to talk right now, and actually, I'm not okay. You'd be surprised how many people disappeared after that. But the ones who stayed, oh, they were gold. Like my neighbor who started texting me terrible memes at 3 a.m. because she knew I couldn't sleep. Or my cousin who showed up with fries and said nothing except, eat now, cry later. Or the nurse who once said, you don't have to inspire me, you just have to breathe. That changed something in me. I stopped forcing optimism into places it didn't belong. I stopped sugarcoating scans, and I definitely stopped smiling through appointments that scared me because I realized strength isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's just showing up when you'd rather disappear. One afternoon, I met another patient during infusion. She was older, maybe late 60s, wore giant sunglasses indoors. I complimented them. She looked at me and said, they make me feel less seen. I nodded. I got it. We didn't talk much after that, but the next week she handed me a pair of sparkly clip on earrings. If I'm gonna rot, she said, I want to sparkle doing it. We laughed so hard the nurse had to hush us. That was one of the first times I felt something better than strong. I felt real. The first time I walked into the infusion room, I thought it smelled like rubber gloves and lost hope. It was bright, too bright. The kind of brightness that doesn't feel warm or welcoming, just clinical. Artificial light bouncing off pale walls and metal poles on wheels. The chairs were all recliners, but not the comfy kind, the ones that try to say, we care, but scream, we care on a budget. I stood there holding a tote bag full of snacks I couldn't eat, books I wouldn't read, and a journal I was too scared to open. A nurse pointed to a seat near the window. That one's good, she said. Lots of sunlight. Sunlight felt ironic in a room filled with poison. Still, I sat down, rolled up my sleeve, watched as she hung the first bag of liquid death or salvation, depending on the day. And then came the sound click, click, drip. The IV pump relentless, the metronome of my new life. The nurse smiled gently. Just breathe, she said. So I did, sort of. Infusion days became their own kind of routine. A world within the world. Same faces, same jokes, same unwritten rules. Rule 1, always bring a blanket. Hospital air conditioning is merciless. Rule 2, don't ask what someone else has unless they tell you. Rule 3, if someone offers you a ginger chew, accept it. They're trying to save your stomach and your soul. There was an older man who sat near the corner. Every session he wore a suit. Full-on tie, cufflinks, polished shoes. Someone finally asked him why. He said, I wore a suit to my wedding, to my daughter's graduation, to my wife's funeral. Cancer doesn't get to make me dress down. We all started calling him Mr. Fancy. There was a teenager, too. Always had her earbuds and face buried in her phone stickers all over her IV pole. One day I caught a glimpse of her screen. She was editing a video of her chemo sessions complete with dance music and sparkle filters. I asked, are you making content out of this? She grinned. If I'm going to suffer, might as well go viral. Somehow between nausea and fatigue, we all became a weird little tribe. Connected not by choice, but by needles and nausea. Our battle cry wasn't courage, it was dark humor. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians knew anything useful or were just winging it with herbs and bloodletting. Sitting here, I sometimes felt like that, a human science project, hoping the formulas would land me on the right side of history. I remember the day I realized I wasn't afraid of the needle anymore. I didn't flinch, didn't look away, just rolled up my sleeve and said, let's get it over with. The nurse winked. You're a pro now. I didn't feel like a pro. I felt like a tired version of myself who just didn't have the energy to be scared anymore. One day, a new patient walked in. Deer in headlights expression. Hands clutching paperwork like it could protect her. She was led to the chair beside me. I smiled gently. First time I asked, she nodded. I pulled a ginger chew from my bag and offered it. This helps with the nausea. Also bring socks next time. Your toes will thank you. She gave me a small, grateful smile. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't just surviving this. Maybe I was becoming someone who could make it less terrifying for someone else. It was during the 3rd month of treatment that I began losing time. Not in some sci-fi parallel universe kind of way. More like I blinked and Tuesday became Friday. Entire days slipped through my fingers like sand I wasn't even trying to hold on to. There were stretches where I couldn't tell you what I did not because I was unconscious, but because nothing stuck. Wake up, take meds. Try to eat, lie down, doze off, repeat. My life started to feel like a VHS tape someone kept rewinding and replaying on mute. I started calling them blur days. On blur days, the most heroic thing I did was brush my teeth or sit up for 10 minutes without needing a nap afterward. These aren't the kinds of moments people post about on recovery blogs or talk about in documentaries, but they are real. Blur days made me feel small, like I was shrinking, dissolving into the fabric of the couch and the walls and the ceiling fan that spun above me endlessly, as if it too was searching for something to hold on to. And in those still moments, something darker crept in. Not panic, not sadness, something quieter, emptier. A voice that whispered, you're wasting your time. It's cruel, isn't it? You fight to stay alive and then feel guilty for not doing anything remarkable with the time you fought for. I tried to read, fell asleep. Tried to journal, couldn't finish a sentence. Tried to make every day count, as that motivational mug told me. But some days just refused to be counted. Historians still argue whether Vincent van Gogh's mental breaks were tied to illness, genius, or starvation, but whatever the truth, I understood now how even color could disappear from someone's days. Until one afternoon, something tiny changed everything. I was sitting by the window sipping lukewarm tea I didn't really want when a sparrow landed on the railing. Nothing special. Just a bird. But it tilted its head, looked at me like I was the strange one, then hopped closer and started pecking at invisible crumbs. I stared at that sparrow for a full 5 minutes. No thoughts, no sadness, just there. And when it flew away, I felt something strange presence. That was the first time in weeks I felt in my body. So I started looking for sparrows. Not literally, but metaphorically. Anything that broke through the blur. The cool side of the pillow, the smell of garlic frying in a neighbor's kitchen, the way my cat flopped on his back and demanded belly rubs like a drama king. I didn't need my days to be full of meaning. I just needed them to feel like mine again. One of the nurses told me sometimes rest is the most rebellious act you can commit. She wasn't wrong. So I stopped apologizing for blur days, started recording them in a notebook with tiny phrases. Today was slow. I made it to the balcony. I laughed at a meme. These became my proof of life. Because not every day needs to be powerful. Some just need to be survived. And sometimes surviving is the most powerful thing you'll ever do. They don't tell you how lonely healing can be. Everyone rallies at the beginning. The messages pour in, the meal deliveries, the cards, the carefully curated playlist with names like Get Well Warrior or You Got This. For a while, you feel cradled by love, supported, held. And then they taper off, not because people stop caring, most of them still do. But life moves on. For them, anyway. For you, it's still the same four walls, the same countdown to the next appointment, the same question, how am I still here while everything else is moving? I remember sitting on the couch one night, TV flickering in the background, untouched tea cooling on the table, and feeling the weight of silence like a second illness. It wasn't about needing someone to fix things. I didn't want grand speeches or cheerful distractions. I just wanted someone to sit beside me and say nothing and not leave. Some friendships didn't make it through this year. That surprised me more than anything. The people I thought would be there weren't. Not because they were bad people, but because sickness makes people uncomfortable. It exposes the truth that we're fragile. That control is an illusion. That sometimes the strong ones fall apart. One friend said, I just don't know what to say. I told her, you don't have to say anything, just stay. She didn't, and that hurt more than the needle in my vein. But healing isn't just about mending the body. It's about learning to grieve the people who couldn't walk this road with you and choosing to keep walking anyway. Thankfully, some people stayed, unexpected ones. Like the barista down the street who started putting smiley faces on my to-go cup. Or my landlord who began leaving flowers at my door with no note. Or the elderly woman upstairs who knocked one day just to ask if I needed more tea. Small gestures, huge impact. Historians still argue whether it was the invention of antibiotics or better sanitation that truly lowered global death rates, but honestly, I think it was kindness. Quiet, consistent kindness. I began to redefine connection. It wasn't long phone calls or deep conversations, it was shared glances, small texts, a meme at midnight, a post-it note that simply said, still here. I created what I called a human inventory list in my phone names of people I could be 100% real with. No filters, no pressure to be inspiring. The list was short, but it was enough. I also started talking to myself more, out loud. Not in a dramatic movie monologue way, just little things. Okay, we're doing this. Let's just get through the next 10 minutes. You're okay. You're still here. Sometimes I needed my own voice to remind me I hadn't disappeared. Loneliness didn't vanish. It still showed up, especially in the middle of the night when everything felt too quiet, too still. But I stopped treating it like the enemy. Started treating it like weather, something to acknowledge, to move through, to let pass. One night during a bout of insomnia, I bundled up and walked to the balcony. The moon was stupidly bright, like it had something to prove. I looked up at it and whispered, do you ever get tired of showing up? The moon naturally said nothing, but I stayed there anyway. Because even in my most disconnected moments, I still belonged to the sky, to the air, to the soft rhythm of breath. And that meant I hadn't gone anywhere. Not really. I used to think milestones were about birthdays, anniversaries, promotions, the kind of things you could post about with emojis and cake. Now, a milestone is something like, I made it through a whole week without throwing up. Or I walked to the mailbox and back without needing to sit down. There's no party for those, no applause. Just a quiet pride that settles deep in your bones, the kind that whispers you're still doing it, even now. This year I started tracking wins differently. I kept a small notebook on the nightstand. Nothing fancy, just a beat-up spiral with doodles in the margins and a coffee ring on the back cover. At the top of each page, I'd write the date in one sentence, what didn't destroy me today. Some days the answer was, drank water without gagging, didn't cry during blood draw, smiled at a stranger, watched the sunset instead of my phone. These became my tiny victories. Historians still argue whether the Great Wall of China actually kept invaders out or mostly served as a symbol of national unity. Either way, I understand now how small efforts stone by stone become a fortress. These wins were my wall. And then came the milestone that caught me off guard. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. Not a forced hey to make someone else feel better. A real from the belly cheeks hurting kind of laugh. The kind that startles you with its honesty. It happened during a video call with my cousin. She was trying to show me her new bangs, but her camera was angled so high I could only see her ceiling. I told her she looked like a mysterious ghost on a hair makeover show, and we both lost it. I laughed so hard I had to mute myself to cough. And when I caught my breath, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had forgotten what laughing like that felt like. For 5 full minutes, I wasn't a patient, I wasn't a diagnosis, I was just me. That moment reminded me that healing doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like a joke at the right time. A good hair day. A song that hits differently. A Tuesday that doesn't suck. I celebrated those days in private ways. Wore my favorite earrings even if I wasn't going anywhere. Used the expensive shampoo even if my hair was barely growing back. Lit a candle at dinner. Wrote a thank you note to my own lungs. One afternoon I danced in my kitchen. No music. Just me wobbling and twirling and almost slipping on a rogue carrot peel. It wasn't graceful, but it was joyful. No one saw it. No one needed to, because sometimes the best milestones are the ones you don't share, the ones that stay soft and quiet, like a secret between you and your survival. Hospitals have their own kind of weather. Some days feel light, like spring nurses crack jokes. Results come back clean, and the fluorescent lights don't feel quite so aggressive. Other days are pure November gray heavy, every hallway echoing with a silence that doesn't want to be named. This was a November kind of day. I had come in for what was supposed to be a routine scan, nothing dramatic, just a checkup. But when I walked into the imaging department, the technician looked at me with that subtle tightness around the eyes. Not worry exactly, but a softness that said, I know what you're carrying. The scan itself was short. Hold your breath, stay still, breathe. But afterward, I sat in the waiting area longer than usual. Too long. That's when the doubt started creeping in. What if it's back? What if it never left? What if all this hope was just a break before the fall? I didn't want to spiral, but that's what fear does. It doesn't knock, it lets itself in. Waiting for test results became a recurring character in my life, always silent, always unwelcome, always stealing sleep and appetite like some invisible thief. Historians still argue whether medieval alchemists were true scientists or deluded mystics. But honestly, waiting for medical test results feels a lot like alchemy. You pray that your body's secret elements have mixed in just the right way to create something survivable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my phone in one hand and my breath caught somewhere in my throat. I scrolled mindlessly, stopping at a quote someone had posted. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. I didn't save it, didn't repost, but I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Eventually, the results came in. Stable. No new growth. The kind of outcome that's supposed to make you cheer. Instead, I exhaled, not joy, just relief. Heavy, aching relief. I realized something, then healing isn't linear. It's not a staircase you climb with each test. It's more like waves. You float. You get pulled under, you resurface. Over time, I learned how to ride them. I built rituals around the wait. Tea instead of coffee, less anxiety. No Googling symptoms after 8 p.m. One episode of something funny before bed. A promise to myself. No thoughts about tomorrow after midnight. These didn't fix the fear, but they gave it shape. And shape means it can be held, even survived. The scans would keep coming, so would the waits, and maybe someday one wouldn't be stable. But I decided I wouldn't let that steal today. Today, I was okay, and that was enough. By the time spring rolled around, I found myself talking to my body like it was an old friend I had betrayed. Hey, I whispered one morning, hand on my chest, I know we've been through it. I never thought I'd have to rebuild trust with my own skin, my bones, my breath. But that's what happens when you spend a year in battle with the very vessel that's supposed to carry you. You start seeing it less like you and more like a battlefield. Or worse, a stranger. There were mornings I hated it, resented the scars, the weight gain from steroids, the bruises, the bloating, the ghost of eyebrows. It was like waking up inside a body you didn't choose. But I also saw the other side. This body hadn't given up. It had held on. Even when my mind was screaming enough, my heart kept beating. My lungs kept expanding, my feet kept moving. That deserved a thank you. So I began to move again. Not like before, no running, no classes. Just gentle stretching, a short walk. Breathing exercises that made me laugh because, well, who forgets how to breathe? Apparently me. I signed up for a free online yoga class. The instructor had this impossibly soothing voice and kept saying things like, let your body speak. Mine mostly said ouch. Still, I kept showing up. Rolled out the mat, bent, reached, wobbled. Every movement a quiet rebellion against the voice in my head that whispered, you're broken. Historians still argue whether ancient gladiators were celebrated heroes or exploited victims of spectacle, but I'm starting to think we're all a little bit of both, especially when it comes to our bodies. We endure, we perform, we heal not for show, but for survival. I started taking pictures again. Not selfies, just little moments. My hand gripping a mug feet dangling off the porch, a shadow on the wall. Proof that I was here, inhabiting space. I stopped measuring progress by weight or energy and started tracking something more important, ease. How easily can I smile today? Can I laugh without flinching? Can I walk without thinking about every step? One day, I danced again, nothing fancy, just a slow spin in my living room, while some old song played on shuffle. My body moved like it remembered joy, not just endurance. Joy. And for once, I didn't care how I looked. I cared how I felt. Strong and beautiful, maybe. Alive, yes. That was enough. There's something no one tells you about cancer time becomes slippery. It stretches and contracts in strange ways. A 10-minute doctor's visit can feel like an hour. A whole week might pass in what feels like a single nap. Holidays show up without warning. Birthdays sneak past while you're too tired to notice. I used to have plans, schedules, color-coded calendars. Now I have sticky notes and pill alarms. Still, I tried to reclaim some structure. I started marking time in my own way, not by days or deadlines, but by tiny personal events. Like the first day I craved coffee again, or the day I slept all night without waking up, or even the Tuesday I didn't cry. I began to celebrate the unconventional. My new year didn't start on January 1st. It started on the day my blood work finally showed signs of recovery. I called it New Life Day. Bought myself a cupcake. Wore my favorite shirt. Took a blurry selfie in the bathroom mirror. No balloons, no champagne, just me whispering still here. Historians still argue whether Julius Caesar's decision to switch to the Julian calendar was for political control or just to fix harvest dates, but I understand the need to reshape time when life stops following predictable rhythms. I even started giving months new names in my journal. Pennyweary, the month of harsh treatments. Floatgust, the month I felt untethered drifting. Hope-vember when I finally felt something stirring again. It helped renaming time, made it feel like something I owned. There was one afternoon early summer, I think, when I sat outside on the porch and realized I couldn't remember the exact date, but I knew how I felt calm. That used to scare me not knowing the day. Now it felt like freedom. Like I had finally loosened my grip on the need to control every minute, every outcome. One of the nurses once said, "You heal slower when you're always counting." She was right. So I stopped. Stopped counting days since diagnosis. Stopped counting how many pills I had left. Stopped measuring myself against who I used to be before all this began. Instead, I asked, who am I today? Some days I was strong, some days I was a puddle, some days I was both. All of it was valid. Time wasn't my enemy anymore. It was a companion, odd, unpredictable, sometimes annoying, but walking beside me nonetheless. One day I might run out of time. We all do. But for now, I've learned to meet it where it is. Not in months, not in milestones, but in moments. Like this one right here, right now, where I'm still breathing, still writing, still me. One morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize her. Not because of the bald head, that part I'd made peace with. It was the eyes. They looked older, not aged, but deeper. Like they'd seen too much in too little time. I stood there, toothbrush in hand, frozen for a second too long. Who is this person? And just like that, I realized I was grieving. Not just the physical things, hair, energy, appetite, but the version of me that existed before the diagnosis. The girl who thought headaches were just headaches, who never read lab reports, who planned weekends like they were guaranteed. She was gone. No funeral, no goodbyes, just erased. Grief, I learned, isn't always about death. It's also about change. It's mourning the life you thought you'd have, the person you thought you were becoming. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra died by asp bite or poison, but regardless, the tragedy remains a powerful woman forced into a corner clinging to dignity in her final act. I felt that in my own way. Backed into a new life I never chose, forced to carry myself like it still belonged to me. So I started writing letters, not to people, to versions of myself. Dear me, before the diagnosis. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate your energy, your obliviousness, your lightness. You didn't know how lucky you were, but I forgive you. Dear me during chemo. You were so brave even when you didn't feel it, especially then. Dear future. Me, if you're reading this, you made it further than I thought. I hope you're not just surviving anymore. I hope you're dancing. It helped. Some nights I'd reread them. Remind myself that I'm not just this moment, this version. I am all the versions before, during, and whatever's next. I took that reflection and softened it toward her. Started saying things out loud like, you're still here. You did great today. You don't have to fix everything. It felt silly at first, but over time, those words became armor. I began to dress differently too. Not to cover the changes, but to honor them. Bright scarves, big earrings, lipstick that said I'm alive and I know it. One day I met someone in the elevator. She looked at me, then smiled. You look powerful. I thanked her not because of vanity, but because it was the first time in months that someone described me as something other than sick. That evening, I wrote another letter. Dear Mirror Girl, you don't need to go back to who you were. You've earned every inch of this evolution. Keep going. The first time I stepped back into the world, it felt too loud. The grocery store, fluorescent lights, flickering carts, clanging people, brushing past each other like life had never paused. Like the world hadn't stopped for me. Like it didn't even notice I had been missing. And maybe it didn't, but I had. I'd missed this. The hum of a normal day, the smell of overripe bananas, the awkward squeak of old sneakers on the tile floor, the way the cashier said next without even looking up. It overwhelmed me and I loved it, because normal was my new thrill. The first time I walked into a bookstore again, I cried. I stood between the self-help and poetry aisles and wept silently because for months I wasn't sure I'd ever be there again. Just browsing. Do you know what a miracle it is to browse? Historians still argue whether Gutenberg's printing press was truly the most revolutionary invention of the last millennium, but standing there touching spines of books I'd never read, I was convinced it saved my sanity. I picked up a novel not about cancer, not about healing, just a silly romance with a cheesy cover. I bought it, devoured it in 2 days. Felt guilty for a second, then didn't. I realized healing also meant giving myself permission to not be defined by illness 24/7. I didn't need to earn joy, I just needed to let it in. So I said yes to little things. Yes to a short walk, even if I needed a nap after. Yes to lunch with a friend, even if I couldn't taste much. Yes to sitting in a park, feeding ducks stale bread and pretending it was a gourmet feast. That was the first time I felt truly alive in public again. Not just surviving behind four walls, but visible. Moving. Laughing. One afternoon, I met an old colleague by chance. She looked at me and gasped, I didn't recognize you. You look different. She didn't mean it unkindly, and she wasn't wrong. I smiled and replied, yeah, I've been through things. She didn't ask what. She just nodded, and for once, that was enough. Re-entry into the world after cancer isn't glamorous. It's cautious, tender, often clumsy, but it's sacred. Every errand becomes a pilgrimage. Every hello, a small resurrection. Every mundane thing, from tying your shoes to standing in line, is an act of defiance against what tried to erase you. So I walked slower, smiled more, and whispered thank yous to everything, even to the checkout beep. Word count 194, awaiting continue. Ban giorno continue. ChatGPT giorno section 4. There came a point when people stopped asking, how are you feeling, and started asking, are you back to normal yet? Normal. That word stung more than I expected. Because what is normal after your body has been a battleground? After your identity has been carved and rearranged by IV lines, hospital gowns, and conversations that begin with, unfortunately, we found something I used to say yes just to make them feel better. Smile, nod, yeah, I'm getting there. But inside, I didn't know what they even looked like anymore. I wasn't who I was before. I didn't want to be. That version of me had never learned how to sit still with pain, or make peace with uncertainty, or savor the silence between beeps on a monitor. I wasn't broken, I was rewritten. And honestly, that's harder for other people to accept than it is for me. Historians still argue whether Joan of Arc's trial was a legitimate religious inquiry or a politically driven execution. Either way, she was punished for refusing to be what others needed her to be. I feel that. I wasn't trying to be a saint, I just didn't want to pretend anymore. So I began to redefine normal. Normal was needing more rest than I used to. Normal was getting anxious before every scan. Normal was saying no to things I used to say yes, to loud places, crowded events, toxic people. Normal was having boundaries, real ones. And the truth, it felt good. I found joy in routines that once felt boring. Washing the dishes without nausea. Folding laundry while humming some dumb 90s song. Cooking for myself actual meals, not just toast or saltines. I even planted herbs on my windowsill. Basil, mint, rosemary. Watching them grow felt like therapy. They didn't ask anything of me, just light water patience. One afternoon, I made a salad from my little garden and felt like a wizard. It was silly and perfect. Slowly, I stopped trying to prove I was better, started just being. Some days my energy ran out by noon. Other days I stayed up late journaling and laughing at memes like a teenager. There was no timeline, no finish line. Just a quiet commitment to wake up and try again. I was living. Not a return to who I was, not a rebound, a reimagining. And that I realized was more powerful than any version of normal I'd ever known. There's a moment when you realize you're no longer just recovering, you're becoming. Becoming someone new. Someone softer in some places, tougher in others. Someone who doesn't flinch at uncertainty anymore. Someone who doesn't need every question answered to feel peace. That moment crept up on me slowly like light spilling under a door. It was during a phone call with an old friend. We hadn't spoken since the early days of my diagnosis, and she asked gently, "So, what's next for you?" I didn't have a plan. Not really. No 5-year vision, no color-coded calendar. But I paused and out came this, I just want to live like I mean it. She laughed like it was profound, and maybe it was. Historians still argue whether Emily Dickinson's poetry was meant for publication or simply a private form of survival. Either way, her words outlived her. That stuck with me. Maybe becoming isn't about doing more. Maybe it's about being more present. So I began to show up for myself. Every morning I started lighting a candle, not for prayer, not for ritual, just to mark the start of the day, to say I'm here. I changed how I moved through the world, walked slower, looked up more, smiled at dogs, ate lunch outside when I could, even if it meant shivering under a jacket. I also stopped explaining myself, stopped shrinking around people who didn't understand, stopped giving disclaimers for my choices, stopped apologizing for needing rest. Because here's the thing, I fought for this version of me. She's staying. I explored old hobbies with new eyes, picked up a paintbrush, wrote terrible poems, burned banana bread on purpose just to see if I could laugh about it. Spoiler, I did. Laughter came easier now, so did tears. Everything felt sharper, not painful, just vivid. Even a breeze through the window felt like a love letter. One morning I caught myself singing while brushing my teeth. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't on key, but it was mine. I was becoming someone I hadn't met before. Not better, not healed. Just here, wide-eyed, scarred real. That version of me she didn't need fixing. She needed space, and I was finally giving it to her. There's something beautiful about doing nothing and not feeling guilty about it. I used to think rest had to be earned, that every slow afternoon or nap or hour spent just being needed justification. I had a rough week. I barely slept. I was so productive yesterday. But this year, I stopped needing excuses. Rest became sacred. Stillness became medicine. There was a Tuesday where I stayed in bed until noon. Not because I was sick, not because I was depressed, just because I wanted to. I opened the window, let the sun fall on my face, and listened to the sound of life moving outside. Kids yelling, dogs barking, some neighbor's leaf blower having an existential crisis, and I smiled. Because I was no longer missing it, I was inside it. That day, I wrote one line in my journal, "The world doesn't need you to rush." Historians still argue whether the concept of time zones created in the 19th century unified the world or complicated it, but either way, I've learned not to live by anyone else's clock. My time is mine now. I stopped booking every minute. Started leaving space gaps where nothing needed to happen. Gaps where I could breathe, reflect, or just stare at the ceiling and count the freckles on my arm. It's amazing what comes to the surface when you stop trying to fill every moment. Memories, ideas, gratitude. One afternoon while sipping tea on the couch, I realized I hadn't thought about cancer all day. Not once. I wasn't avoiding it. It just hadn't shown up. I sat with that realization like a secret treasure. No one to celebrate it with, no balloons, no cake. Just me smiling into my mug. I wasn't healed, but I was whole in a new way. And that wholeness didn't come from effort. It came from allowing. Allowing silence, allowing slowness, allowing softness. I think we spend so much time trying to rebuild after trauma, we forget that part of healing is unbuilding too. Unbuilding the pressure, the expectations, the shoulds. So I did nothing, and it meant everything. People always say, you don't know how strong you are until you have to be. But I don't think that's quite right. Strength, I've learned, isn't just what you discover in a crisis. It's what you choose in the quiet after, when no one's watching, when there's nothing to prove, when the fight's over, and yet you still wake up and live with intention. This year, I redefined what strength meant to me. Not lifting weights or pushing through pain, not showing up with a smile when I wanted to disappear, but holding space for myself without apology. There was a day I said no to a family gathering. Too loud, too much energy, too many eyes that wanted me to be okay. And for the first time, I didn't feel bad. I spent that evening in the bath candles lit, listening to soft jazz like I was the main character in a movie no one else was watching. It was glorious. Historians still argue whether Boudica, the Celtic warrior queen, led her uprising out of revenge or principle, but either way, she chose her own war. I've started choosing mine too. Some battles just aren't worth it. So I stopped engaging with people who didn't see me. The ones who said you look great without waiting for the answer to how I actually felt. The ones who treated my survival like an awkward topic best left unspoken. Instead, I spent time with people who understood silence. Friends who came over and just sat, neighbors who left soup on my porch without knocking, strangers online who sent messages like same boat. No advice, just love. That's strength too, the quiet kind. I also started speaking at a local support group. Nothing formal, just 10 chairs in a circle and a box of tissues no one ever wanted to grab first. At first, I was scared. Who was I to offer comfort when I still had so many unanswered questions? But then I saw the nods, the tears, the relief that someone said out loud what they'd only dared think. I miss my old body. I'm afraid of feeling hope. I hate that I survived while someone else didn't. We said it all, and no one flinched. That room became church to me, sacred, raw, and real. I left each meeting a little lighter, a little braver. Strength isn't loud, it doesn't flex, it doesn't need praise. It just shows up. And this year I did, over and over. There's a strange peace that settles in when you stop fearing the unknown. I used to live in the future, worried about test results that hadn't come yet. Imagined worst case scenarios like it was my part-time job. Laid in bed constructing what ifs like towers of cards, delicate trembling, destined to fall. But one morning I woke up and just didn't do that. I made coffee, fed. The cat opened the window and listened to the birds like they had something personal to say. I didn't check my calendar. Didn't reread old doctor's notes. Didn't measure the swelling in my hands. I just was. And it felt revolutionary. Historians still argue whether the oracle at Delphi truly saw the future or simply mirrored people's deepest fears. Either way, I've learned that knowing what's next isn't nearly as valuable as trusting yourself to face it. That's what shifted this year my relationship with fear. It didn't vanish. It still showed up at 2 a.m. wearing the face of uncertainty and whispering, what if it comes back? But now instead of panicking, I'd nod and say, I know, but it's not here right now. And right now is all I have. Right now is all any of us ever have. So I filled more of those right nows with things that made me feel more alive than afraid. I tried pottery, terrible at it. My vase looked like a sad mushroom, but I loved it. I took long drives with no destination. I read poetry out loud to myself like some dramatic 1800s widow. I bought a kite, an actual rainbow-colored kite, and flew it on a hill until I couldn't stop laughing. No one tells you how healing laughter is when it bubbles up unexpectedly. Not forced, not polite, just pure ridiculous joy. That joy didn't erase the bad days, but it balanced them. One afternoon, I met a little girl at the pharmacy. She pointed at my headscarf and asked, "Are you magic?" Her mom gasped. I laughed. And I said, "Yes, but don't tell anyone." In that moment, I realized maybe I am. Not because I beat anything, not because I survived, but because I kept showing up, kept finding light, kept choosing to love the world even when it didn't love me back in the way I wanted. That's magic. And I'm not afraid of what's next anymore. Because today is here, and it's enough. The word legacy used to feel too big for me. Like it belonged to presidents and poets, not someone like me, someone who forgot to water her plants and burned toast more often than not. But something shifted this year. One evening, I was going through a drawer filled with journals, hospital bracelets, Polaroids, scribbled notes on napkins, years of moments both profound and embarrassingly mundane. And I thought, this is it, isn't it? Not legacy with a capital L. Just pieces of a life lived on purpose. Historians still argue whether Vincent van Gogh's success would have changed had he lived long enough to witness it. But maybe legacy isn't about being known. Maybe it's about being felt. So I began gathering those pieces. Not to publish, not to prove anything, just to preserve. A recipe I modified to fit my new stomach. A list of people I forgave, including myself. A letter to my future niece who may never meet me, but might inherit my crooked laugh. I started leaving notes inside books I donated. Wrote things like, "This story held me once, maybe it will hold you too. You matter. Don't let the world convince you otherwise. There's no rule that says healing has to be linear. Scribble all over it." It felt like planting invisible seeds. One day, someone might read my words and not know who I was, but still feel seen. That's enough for me. Legacy, I've realized, isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you leave within. I began filming little videos, not for YouTube, just for me. Or maybe for someone someday. I talked to the camera like a friend. No makeup, no filter, just truth. Sometimes I said today was hard. Sometimes I said today I danced in the kitchen. And sometimes I just breathed, quietly, as proof that I could. I don't know who will find these someday, but if they do, I hope they feel less alone. I hope they know it's okay to be soft, to be afraid, to be alive in whatever way you can manage. Because that's what I learned. Legacy doesn't require perfection. Just honesty, just presence, just love. And that I have in abundance. I always thought the end would feel like a storm. Loud, rushing, final. But it didn't. It came slowly, gently, like dust creeping into a quiet room. These days I sleep more, not from sadness. Just a kind of settling. A body that said so much finally choosing silence. And I'm okay with that. The beeping machines, the whispered conversations, the way people hold my hand a little longer now, it's all part of the soft landing. Sometimes I catch myself watching the light on the wall. Just that. The light. Dancing through leaves outside the window, brushing against the ceiling. And I think, if this is what's left, it's enough. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria was destroyed in one tragic blaze or slowly piece by piece over centuries. Either way, its loss wasn't loud. It was accumulation. A slow erasure of voices, one page at a time. I wonder if we all go that way, not all at once, but gently, fading from rooms, from stories, from the noise, but not from love, never from love. The people who visit, they don't cry as much anymore. We laugh more, remember more. Sometimes we don't talk at all, and it feels like the richest conversation I've had in months. My favorite mug is still here, so is my blanket. The photos on the wall, the plant I've somehow kept alive. My story isn't in the grand finale. It's in the accumulation of days I didn't think I'd get of teacups and dog videos and late night texts from people who still remember my birthday. And now I think I'm ready. Not because I've said everything I needed to say, but because I've lived enough to know there will always be more to say. And someone else will say it. Someone's still becoming. So I close my eyes often. Not to sleep always, sometimes just to listen. To the quiet hum of a world still turning. To the breath I'm still lucky enough to have. To the memory of who I was and still am echoing through time. If you're still here, thank you. Thank you for listening, for breathing with me, for holding space in a world that rarely pauses for moments like this. You've made it through 20 chapters of my life, 20 tiny windows, into a journey that once terrified me and now comforts me in the strangest, most unexpected ways. So let's slow down together now. Let's stop chasing meaning for just a minute and sit in the stillness. Breathe in, feel the weight of your own body wherever you are, couch bed, train, seat, floor. Let it be soft, let it be heavy, and here. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're exactly where you are supposed to be. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. You don't need to wait for a crisis to start living like it matters. You don't need a diagnosis to treat life like a gift. So go outside, or don't, text someone. Or sit in the dark and hum to yourself. Whatever it is, let it be yours. The waiting room doesn't last forever, but while we're here, we might as well decorate it with joy. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, smile. I'm still here, and maybe so are you. End of script. See you again tomorrow.